Welcome to the care and preservation of ephemera and oversized materials. So my name is Casey and I am the processing archivist at the Milwaukee Public Library. If you have any questions after this, you can feel free to email us at mplarchives@milwaukee.gov. So today we're going to talk about ephemera and some oversized materials and then cover basics of how to care for them based on our experiences. We aren't conservators, we're just archivists sharing what we have learned. So we will cover some examples of the items, preservation guidelines based on the specific items, possible resources, and examples of care from our own collections. So Oxford defines ephemera, if you're not real familiar with this word, I wasn't until I started here at MPL, items of collectible memorabilia, typically written or printed ones that were originally expected to have only a short-term usefulness or popularity. So typically paper, but not exclusively. For example, here we've got some signs from some kind of protest or rally. There's some ticket stubs and some ribbons. That's pretty typical when you think of ephemera. And then we have these actually the only two signs, some of the only materials we have from the 1918 pandemic, which that question came right up in 2020. What did we have? So we make sure we pulled those out so we knew where they were. And then this is Billy the Bookworm, who is a puppet that was sold in a museum gift shop in our building. And he could probably artifact or ephemera. He really wasn't meant to last as long. He's 80 some years old, so I think he looks pretty good, but he is a little creepy. So some other examples are, maps, newspapers, bumper stickers, buttons, playbills, brochures, pamphlets, flyers, posters, things that weren't really expected to last that long, but they now become very collectible. So preservation guidelines for care and storage. Options will vary depending on the item size. So you can encapsulate the item if it's appropriate, if it's a flat paper item. You should store those unfolded and flat or rolled if it's just too big. Areas should be cool, dry, and dark. Acid-free boxes, folders, envelopes, sleeves. It really kind of depends on the item. As you can see in some of these pictures, ribbons and buttons, they don't make a specific thing for that. So these are acid-free photo sleeves. And I just kind of organized them however, and then, wrote on there what they were and then kind of set them up in these tiny boxes. For ribbons, I've actually also used like negative sleeves, like polypropylene, like it's negative sleeves, and they kind of lay in there really nicely and keeps them flat and still kind of keeps them together. So it's kind of whatever I have around that will fit. You want to avoid airtight containers. Use acid-free tissue to cushion or protect fragile things, like the picture of Billy in the other slide. He's kind of stuffed with some archival tissue because his face is kind of sinking in, but that helps prop it up. So hopefully it doesn't, sink on itself too much, or at least more slowly. And create guidelines for reproductions. Because people are going to ask you if they can have copies of this. Maybe not the buttons, but like oversized maps or campaign posters, people will ask you for copies of them. So you can suggest for like buttons and things like that, take photos on their phone. It's easier on the fragile items. But for bigger things, you may want to, if you don't have a large print scanner, you may want to find a third-party vendor you can send things out to. And then they can either, send you the scan back or put it on a USB drive. And so people can purchase copies of those images from you. Larger items are really easy to mishandle and cause damage. I mean, if you think of a really big poster or map, and you just don't have arms big enough to carry it, I mean, it's easy, especially if it's folded, it already has creases, it could rip. So consider digitization options with in-person viewing as a last option. So it's easier to show one in a digital display than try to, maneuver one out and not cause any damage to it. And then if you're going to have viewing, set up an area where you can put those. So you have a table that's large enough to cover, so it can lay without falling off the table. So here is some encapsulation. I'm going to go a little more in depth on encapsulation. So if you have someone on staff who's kind of crafty, this might come more easily for them, but it really is pretty straightforward. I literally just learned in the last year or so. So the archival safe plastics for encapsulation are polyester, polyethylene, which is what Mylar is made of, and polypropylene. Often I find the sleeves that you can buy in the office supply stores are generally polypropylene, and Mylar, which we buy in big rolls. As you can see right here, we actually buy a big, this one's actually pretty close to running out. We buy big rolls and we have a great big table. We store some of the new other rolls down here, extra rolls. And then you literally will pull out some of the roll and then put the item you want to encapsulate there, and you would cut around it. Now you want to make sure you leave a border space around it. I think it's supposed to be like a quarter or half an inch. I think it's a quarter of an inch. And then you want to leave additional border because you're going to put double-sided tape. So you may want to leave a half inch to 3/4 of an inch around the item to make room for just a space border and then for the tape that you'll use. So here's some of the supplies. You'll need some scissors or a knife. So these are some weights to kind of keep it flat from moving as you're trying to measure and trim, double-sided tape, and then a squeegee, which you kind of pull across and push out the air bubbles. So you cut the piece out down here, and then you're going to pull this out again and cut a second piece, and then you have the item you want to encapsulate in the middle here. And you want it these two roughly the same size. You can always trim it at the end so it doesn't have to be perfect. And then what you're going to do is you're going to take this top layer off and you're going to start to lay down your double-sided tape. Now you'll leave the paper on the top side of the double-sided tape. So you're just putting the bottom down to where you want it all around the outside. And then you're going to put this on top. You're going to peel up a little corner and then start to peel off the top side tape of that double-sided tape, and you'll kind of stick it down so it attaches to the top. And then you're going to use this squeegee up here and kind of pull off the tape, the top of the paper side of the tape slowly, and then run your squeegee across it, so across the tape, so it sticks really well. And then you're kind of, and you start at the corner, so you push any air bubbles or out of it, so you do it as flat as possible. It can take a few times to get used to, but once you understand kind of the principle of it, it's really not that hard. So don't be intimidated by it. But if you have questions, I can do the best I can to answer. Like I said, I'm not super great at it. I have only been doing it for a couple of years, but it's been really great so that I can encapsulate my own stuff and don't have to wait on anybody when I need something. So here's some pictures of some of the stuff we've encapsulated. Here's a map we have, and then we do label because some of this stuff just gets cataloged, and some goes in the archival collections. But I will say, if you're putting labels on the items, you'll put it on the encapsulation, but just make sure you're not blocking the image. Like, you don't want to put the stickers on the encapsulation right here so people can't see. So sometimes people aren't thinking, and it happens, but so you want to try to put it somewhere where there's no image. Here's a picture of Carl Zeidler right before he enlisted in his uniform in their city hall. He was our mayor that enlisted in the military. And see, as you can see, like, there's big chunks of this missing. I think this was a magazine or a newspaper article, but now that it's encapsulated, nobody can snag this with their fingers, or, they're trying to carry it and it kind of falls over and breaks more. So it really does protect it. And then here's our other Zeidler mayor. Here's some election ephemera from him, so some campaign posters, and they're actually pretty big. Now, they don't take it. Taking pictures is not real great when you have it encapsulated, but if you had to, you could slice off the end, pull the item out, take the picture, and then push it back, and then slide it back in. We don't really do that too often unless something came down, something really important was going on. But so we encapsulated this, it protects it, and then we it's too big to fit in our drawer, so we just kind of rolled it up. Actually, there's several copies of it. And then we put a label on where it belongs on the outside there, and it just basically gets stored like that. So here's some more oversized storage ideas for if you've got big rolled items. Some of these are kind of homemade. As you can see, this looks like probably somebody in our facilities department just kind of put some tubes in there. There's oversized drawers. We store some of the really big maps on top of some of the atlas case here. And then this is just you know, something with a lot of little cubbies just to stick rolled maps in, rolled drawings. I think those are road drawings, Milwaukee Road. This here is, of course, we've stored, these are architecture plans. We've stored them in these cardboard tubes, and then the tubes are numbered with the corresponding number in the inventory. The only thing I will say about this is these are plain cardboard and the drawings are leaning up against it. So really what should be done is there either should be some acid-free paper that is rolled around the drawing and then put in the tube, or we should get acid-free tubes, because those, you know, potentially acidic papers against each other can deteriorate a little faster. But I mean, it's not immediate, so it's something we can work on. So ephemera materials are really popular with patrons. They make great displays. They're very visual. So if you don't have some kind of ephemera collection already, you know, start collecting one. I mean, you can be whatever, you know, see if you've seen, I have a button collection here. Sometimes we turn up boxes and stuff and we're not sure where the stuff comes from. And so if I can't figure out where that it belongs, especially with buttons, I've found a lot of them. I have a little box and I put them in there. And eventually when I get through more materials, I'm probably going to create like a little button collection. And it'll have a finding aid and it'll be in a little box and people will like it. It'll make good display materials. So for example, like these signs down here are our two 1918 pandemic signs. It's about all we have from the 1918 pandemic. But I mean, there's plenty of that around now. So we're collecting all kinds of stuff. So that the next generation, if they want to research the 2020 pandemic, we'll have lots of documents too, but we'll have some pandemic, which will make great displays for the history displays. So if you haven't started one, you know, keep that in mind. They're always really popular. So thanks for attending.